Hey everyone, so for this session, going to be changing it up a little bit, going towards more of the fantasy route as opposed to the typical sci-fi subject matter. So yeah, let's get into the process. Going to be starting with the usual line drawing. Super low commitment here. The idea here is to just loosely get set a foundation for the composition. Nothing super committal, just really laying the groundwork for the rest of the piece here. But it gives me a good idea as to where the values will be, which is extremely important, and how the distance of the layers will be communicated. So for this piece here, I wanted something a little bit more fantastical, as I said, set in a cold setting with this lone boatman where he encounters a distant anomaly sort of thing in the fog. So knowing that, this line work is meant to support that and to kind of give the framework that I can paint over. So at this point, quite happy with the composition of things, not trying out the color palettes. So I wanted this one to be set in an icy sort of environment, maybe somewhere around like Scandinavia or something like that. And at first I started with this humanoid looking creature in the backdrop there. But again, it's super important to keep it really loose at this point. Really accept that things will change and things will pop up that might be better than what you had started before or what you had in mind in the first place. And I think that's a really important thing to have. It's because you don't want to be too locked down and too rigid in your approach, because a lot of things happen within the process that's really cool. And for example, the brush strokes in the back there on the mountains, where I just went in with a very, very loose brush, and I just wanted to give a semblance of ice and snow to contrast with the darkness of the rocks on the mountains there. And I went in with a super loose brush, and I just put down a couple loose strokes. And what ended up happening is those loose strokes informed what I wanted to do. There were a lot of cool things that's happening there in terms of the direction and the volume of the white icy parts, and that informed me. That informed what I wanted to do next, right? So those shapes there really there's a lot of cool things going on there that I felt like I could chip away at and render out even more. So one of the common phrases used in art is a term called happy accidents. And what that means is, during the process, especially when you're going very loose and very very organic, especially at the very beginning of the process, which you should be doing. A lot of the times there's things that come out that you didn't expect, and things that are really cool that happened without your initial intention, and it's something that you can continue pursuing, right? So for example, like those brush strokes at the base of the mountain there was something that I went in without too much intent, but something cool really came out of it, and it was something that felt really good and made me want to pursue even further, right? So throughout the process, a lot of those happy accidents occur, and it's something that you should look out for and continue pursuing, because it's like these little dopamine hits that you get in the process that, you're like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to keep chasing it, and I'm going to keep developing it even further. And then at the end of the day, what you'll get is a piece that's like, sometimes it's not really what you expected, and it's something that just kind of came out of the process. And that's really the fun part of making art, really, at least for me. So at this point, getting a really good feel for the values, the value groups, even getting a little bit of a semblance of the water and the water reflection there. So at this point, like, really starting to feel quite confident with the direction that I wanted to take this in. And now putting a little bit more of that ice, the ice elements in the foreground. Going in with, again, really, really loose brushes. Just trying things out, right? And I can't really emphasize enough the just being loose with things, especially at the very beginning, and not being too attached to the rendering of things. And that's still something that I still struggle with, because as an artist, I think we all want to immediately have this piece that looks good, right? And I think that um, we have to be comfortable enough with the process and trust it a little bit more, and accept that at the very beginning there's going to be mistakes, and there's going to be um, it's just not going to look good right away, right? So here, defining a little bit more the details of that cliff there. Again, using the little happy accidents that occurred earlier on with the direction of the brush strokes, and defining it even more. Using a little bit more of the lasso tool there. Again, it's not a technique that I'm super comfortable with, as I mentioned in the last video. It's one of those things that feel very computer generated for me. It just feels a little too perfect. But I think there's certain ways that you can draw the lasso tool, paint it, and then use the eraser to kind of chip away at the corners to make it look a bit more organic and more natural. And as you notice there, I constantly switch and flip the canvas horizontally. It's a really good way to make sure that your composition is working, because once you get fixated on a certain layout, you don't notice these little kind of errors that you're making. So it's really good to flip every now and then, just to make sure that it's working for either orientation. So here, working on that distant giant monster in the back there. I decided I didn't want something that was too humanoid. I wanted something that's a little bit more maybe insectoid, or something just a little bit more creepy looking in the back there. And I wanted him to be hidden in the fog, that you can't really make out what it is. Almost like a dreamlike state, you know. There was this movie that I watched. I forget what it was called. It was a movie set in Scandinavia, and there was a bunch of friends that they wanted to hike through a forest, and they encountered this monster that always shifted shapes, and you couldn't really ever tell what it really was, and that really made it very, very freaky. And that's something that I wanted to kind of convey here a little bit. If you know that the name of the movie, let me know what it was. I forget what it was called, but it was really good. It was on Netflix, and if you haven't seen it, highly recommend watching it. Yeah, so if you notice here too, the way I'm doing things is once I get something to a certain level, I go back to another thing so that I'm not rendering one thing to super high rendering fidelity, finishing that and then moving on to the next thing. I try to keep things as broad as possible and not get too fixated on one thing, and trying to bring things up as evenly as possible, just to make sure that I have the whole picture in mind, right? And then that way too, at the very end, what happens is you get to decide what aspect of the image you want to develop even further, because not everything needs to be rendered out, right? It's like it's actually like a really cool tool at your disposal as an artist to maybe not render everything to its full fidelity, and use that to communicate um, where you want the viewer's eyes to be drawn towards. So for example, in this piece, again, I didn't want that monster in the back to be too well defined, but I did want the boat and the character on it to, in the foreground, essentially to stand out and catch the eye more, right? So much like the same with values, contrast, um, and noise frequency, you can use fidelity in the same manner, where the higher fidelity something is, the more likely the viewer's eye will be drawn towards that. So here, defining more of the ice bits, that's the floating ice bits on the water. And again, like super happy accident here. I tried out different brushes that I had, and I ended up with these circular patterns, right? And what I really liked about it is that the whole scene is using a lot of jagged and sharp edges. Um, and what I liked about the circular patterns on the ice there is that it provided a really nice contrast to the sharpness. It provided a little bit more of softer shapes, and I quite like that. So now defining the boat. Again, I wanted the eye to be drawn towards the boat. And so yeah, it's using the darkest colors there. I wanted it to have the biggest contrast in the scene. So zooming in and painting in a little bit more in order to do that. And if you notice throughout this piece too, I haven't really zoomed in much, and this is really the first time that I'm zooming in to something. For the most part, I was zoomed out for the entire process, and I think that's a really important thing as well, to really keep your eyes on the prize, as they say, because what typically happens is if you zoom in, then you're fixated again on the finer details of things, and you lose the bigger picture. So I think sort of forcing yourself to paint zoomed out as much as possible is a really good practice, because you're not yeah, like you're really taking the whole image into account, and you're forced to address uh, the whole picture as a whole. But now that the picture is getting established, and now I'm getting to pick the parts that I want to define even further. Now I can afford to zoom in without being too worried about um, you know, neglecting the other parts of the scene. So now giving the character a little bit more life here, trying to figure out what he is a little bit more, thinking about what his purpose is, and his pose has a lot to do with that, right? So I wanted him to not be too alarmed looking. It's almost like he kind of expects uh, this thing to be there. You know, maybe something out of a folklore or something like that that he's heard before. And while he's probably a little bit nervous, but he's not super alarmed, because it's probably something that he's heard from um, his father or his grandfather or something. So at this point, feeling quite, satisfied with the way things are going, and this is where really it starts to become really fun, where you get to just really polish the picture, and add the little embellishments to really punch it up. And at this point, I'm just adding more reflections to the water. Basically, just copied the mountain layers, and flipped it, and then blurred it to give that really nice reflection effect on the water there. And now using a color dodge layer to just add a little bit of warmth, bring a little bit of life to the picture. It was feeling a tad too cold, and I think having some warm aspects to it really punch it up a little bit more. And here again, like I was just experimenting, um, hiding and unhiding layers. And that's like really something I like to do, especially with that giant layer stack that I have. Once in a while, I'll just hide and unhide layers to see what's underneath. And again, happy accidents, right? Like if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have realized that there's aspects of the hidden layer that I wanted to bring out, and so I deleted some of the layers above it to expose some of those things. So yeah, finishing this up, seeing if there are any other improvements that I can make, trying out some level adjustments, any filters that I can use to perhaps just punch it up a little bit more and polish things a little bit more. But other than that, yeah, this is the finished product here. Really enjoyed this piece. Again, really trying to learn how to paint with no 3D assistance whatsoever. Really enjoy this piece. Hopefully you liked it too. Hopefully you learned something new.